Hello and welcome to a combined news for you today. Channel 51 news coming out of Australia and the Josh Bernstein Uncensored, or the JBU show on Substack. Josh Bernstein, welcome for this very first of a brand new concept, let's hope, between Australia, US news, global analysis, and working out what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be back on the program with you. I love doing Australian media. There's so many great patriots in Australia. And I just want to ask you real quick. Normally you have different backgrounds, but today it looks like you have something in outer space. What's the story with that?
Yeah, well, what gives? So as you can see over my left shoulder there is, this is, well, it's not even an artist rendition. It's meant to be a real picture, I suppose, of this interstellar comet called 3I Atlas, only the third ever detected the comet that's come from outside of our solar system. And it was only discovered on the 1st of July, 2025. But there are more revelations seemingly coming out every day. And the latest says that they believe that it's even larger than they first expected. But it's its trajectory to fly past Jupiter, Mars, and then past Earth, going behind the sun, that's got astronomers really thinking that there could be something to this. And it's heading in a direction that's the opposite of the way that the solar system is spinning in space. It's not getting caught in the gravitational pull of even the sun, which is leading people to ask, is it steering itself, and therefore is it under intelligent control? And there's a Harvard University astronomer, Avi Loeb, who's leading this sort of charge. Meanwhile, all the traditionalists are saying, no, it's just another comet. It's an interstellar one. We've only ever seen three, but it's defying all understandings, and that's what makes it so interesting. But what makes it more interesting is the timing of it, because we are at that Project Bluebeam rumor that maybe there's going to be an alien invasion when everything gets taken down. So who knows? And that's why I find it fascinating.
Interesting. I didn't know anything about any of that. All I can really add to that is let's hope it doesn't hit Uranus.
Absolutely. Touche. Bang, bang. There you go. There is nothing like, the idea of not knowing what we don't know, but the idea that people will all have preconceived biases coming to this. Oh, no, it's fake. Oh, no, it's this. Oh, no, it's that. Well, the reality is no one knows anything about anything anymore, but when it comes to outer space, and yet at the same time, you've got Space Force being created for one reason in the US and perhaps others. And, Trump must have been ahead of his time introducing that some 8 years ago, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. Just the other night, we were out driving and we were coming back out from a restaurant, and I look up in the sky and I see this like big bright thing with like a huge tail on it, and it's going from the right to the left. And I'm like, what the heck is that? We took video of it and everything else, but it turns out that it was a SpaceX I guess launch or something like that was visible in the sky. But it was huge. I mean, this thing was like gigantic, and it almost looked like a comet, but it was just moving from the right to the left, and it was huge. So weird things out there, man. Weird things out there.
Absolutely. Look, I have been looking up at the skies for years, hoping to see something that just to prove to myself that these things aren't just made up. And on one particular occasion in northwestern Sydney, I happened to look up on this particular time, and there was this thing that looked like a very large silver balloon, but it was way up. And it was certainly spherical in shape, and that silver shape. And I remember
Hopefully
looking at
it wasn't a Chinese spy balloon.
Well, you know what? When you think about it, perhaps it was something like that. But the fact that it was there and it was not nothing, and it was stagnant. That was the other thing. I thought, well, why isn't it blowing in the breeze like a cloud? It was holding firm. So therefore, again, it would perhaps had some sort of power control. And not thinking anything of it, didn't think to take a photograph looking directly up or anything like that, but certainly saw it and looked around to see if anyone else in the area had taken notice. But of course, no one ever does, which also leads you to believe that you're seeing something that no one else does. And I think that this is part of it. But look, the big thing for me about the concept for, again, talking about what we talk about in news is that the idea of the subject of exopolitics, the politics of off-planet, which is a real thing. And it's the concept of, if you were to go off planet, where does Earth's jurisdiction end and where does the galaxy start, or the solar system start? I mean, it's a ridiculous concept given that, effectively there's no one else out there. Why would we even be thinking of it? But when we get to the stage that there is someone else out there, then this type of thing becomes a real thing in intergalactic understanding. And of course, never say never. We don't know what's coming. This week we saw these crazy AI clips that were on Trump's own social media pages suggesting med beds, for example. Now, why would that get on there? Was it a hack? Was it not? Was it to tell us that there's, some more information? And that's when I think, when you open your mind to possibility, you allow yourself to think of good possible outcomes, as opposed to the very tough negatives that we've had for so long. And we'll get into a minute, like Australia and the UK. I mean, digital ID, suppression of so many things, all for our convenience and safety. And yet the opposite holds when you're dealing with the US, that it seems that, the idea of land of the free, home of the brave, and space, the final frontier. It's the exact antithesis of what we put up with here in Australia, and of course that we see in Europe.
Interesting. That's why I love doing your show, because I never know what we're going to be able to talk about. I know that our Congress and Congress members in the United States have come out publicly and said that they have seen spaceships, they have seen other terrestrial life, they have seen different things in our orbit out, in outer space that they could not explain. And so I don't know. I mean, there's the whole thing with Roswell, there's the whole thing with Area 51. I don't know. I have that feeling like if there really were something out there, they probably would have come and already said hello to us by now. But I don't know. I don't really think about it too much. I just kind of worry about the things I can worry about and see and hear and all that. And that's the politics in the U.S. and around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of, your government is now in a shutdown and the blame game starts. Now, I'd like to potentially run a few clips for us, because I don't understand Democrat logic, and I'm hoping that you're going to be able to explain it. Let's now cut to this one. The Republicans are talking about, well, they want to get the government operating again, but it seems that they're under some sort of weird denial. Let's take a look.
Our House colleagues for doing the work. You sent us a clean, continuing resolution. Unfortunately, we are here this morning in a government shutdown that Democrats wanted. Chuck Schumer, at the behest of a bunch of liberal, far-left activist groups, has walked his Democrat colleagues into a boxed canyon. There's no way out, folks. There's no way out. This could have been avoided. It's totally unavoidable. And everybody's now asking the question, how does this end? Well, it ends when the Senate Democrats pick this bill up, passed by the House of Representatives, and vote for it. It's on the floor of the Senate. We're going to vote later this morning on this, 24 pages. Does this look partisan? Does this look dirty to you? 24 pages to fund the government. Nothing more, nothing less, nothing else. The House kept it simple. We kept it simple in the Senate. This is something, as the Speaker noted, that 13 times in the past Senate Democrats have done when they were in the majority and Joe Biden was in the White House. This is a very straightforward issue. It's not complicated.
So the Democrats are telling the Republicans, we're not voting for this, we're not supporting a continuing resolution because we want to put certain things back into the budget for our spending. So in other words, if we don't get to spend the money that we want on what we want, no one gets anything. Am I reading that right?
No, that's exactly what they have been saying. But let's talk about the lie that they have also been perpetrating. They've been going out to the media and they've been saying that we don't want to see, quote, Americans, keyword, Americans lose their health care. Well, that's a lie, because it's not about Americans. They want to give billions upon billions of dollars to illegal aliens for health care. They want to leave that word out because it doesn't fit their narrative. And so really that's the whole thing. But let me give a compliment to Republicans. My goodness, I was expecting an 800-900 page bill that no one has ever read, and some staffers, were up till 3 o'clock in the morning writing. But to see a clean bill, 24 pages, that's it. That's how it should be, where a senator and a congressman can go sit down in the corner of their office with the door closed and read it real quick and then say, oh, okay, I know exactly what's in it. But remember, the way Washington works is they put all these poison pills in it. They put all these different things in it. They don't read it. And then even like Nancy said a long time ago, well, we have to pass it to find out what's in it. Like, what? What are you talking about? So I wanted to give them that compliment. But on the flip side of this, Republicans, as Trump likes to say, hold all the cards. And they do. And Russ Vought is licking his chops. He can't wait to cut the government. And he said it's going to start within 48 hours. I went out on X and I said, hey, Russ, why wait 48 hours? Do it now. Let's get rid of 100,000 plus of these federal employees. So we'll see what happens. The longest shutdown in history was under President Trump, and it was for 35 days. There's been 21 shutdowns, but let's talk about that notion for your audience. There's no such thing as a government shutdown. The reason is because it doesn't exist. The government never shuts down. Yeah, maybe a couple of national parks and museums might be closed temporarily, big deal. And by the way, those folks that work there, they're tickled pink. They're happy. They could care less whether it's open or not. Why? Because they're still going to get paid when they come back. They're going to be reimbursed for the time that they're not there. So why not take some time off? That's number one. And number two, the entire government, all the agencies are basically open and functional. So this whole notion that the government shuts down, it never shuts down. And quite frankly, I wish it would, because then we could really get rid of a lot of people, or RIF as it's called, reduction in force.
Well, you've set the tone for where we're headed now with some images and some videos. Let's start with Russ Vought now. So here he said nearly $8 billion in the green new scam funding to fuel the left's climate agenda has been cancelled. More info to come from at Energy. Well, that's exciting, isn't it, Josh?
Very exciting. Look, the entire green new scam is exactly that. And when they started talking about it years ago and coming out with it, all you had to do is look at the details. The devil's always in the details. And it talked about refurbishing equipment and buildings and things like that to a certain code that no one could ever even comprehend getting close to being able to qualify for. It was the true, I would say, reindustrialization of America. You know, the industrialization of America back in the 20s and 10s and all that. They wanted to do the opposite. They wanted to take that away, and they wanted to go with cow farts and steam engines, and and nothing with gas powered, and everything with wind and turbine and all these other things that don't work. You need wind to make it work, and there's not always wind. And so all of these ideas, number one, they're not as good for the environment, and number two, they're a hell of a lot more expensive. And the last thing we want is to have a green communism, let's call it what it is, at the barrel of a gun, where they're telling us, no, you can't control the temperature in your own home. No, you can't do this or drive your car until we tax you per mile. The whole thing is incredibly just evil, demonic, and really just anti-freedom.
You know, I'm not sure if the term has made it to the US, but it's called watermelon. Here in Australia, green on the outside and red on the inside. The term for the green communists, the watermelons. So there it is. Now, meantime, also from Russ Vought, roughly $18 billion in New York City infrastructure projects have been put on hold to ensure funding is not flowing based on unconstitutional DEI principles. He is not holding back, is he?
No, he's not. And remember, Russ Vought was also in the same position in the first Trump administration. And they did quite a bit back then. But now, after all these years and having been able to plan and strategize, now back in, look out. He knows exactly what he's doing. And I think what they're trying to do is anticipation of New York's mayoral race, possibly going south and going to Mamdani. I think they're trying to Mamdani-proof New York City. Because remember, a lot of the programs that he's promising these white liberal women that are going to vote for him for whatever crazy reason, he's not going to be able to do, because he's not going to have the cash. He's not going to have the money to be able to do it. And so President Trump has also signaled sorry, you guys can go vote for whoever you want to vote for. We won't stop you there. But if you think you're going to fund these programs and ask the government to help you, not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, let's now show you the short clip where Chuck Schumer is asked if this is the Schumer shutdown and the convenience of the audio not working.
Every Republican who's gone on TV the last 12 hours or so has called this the Schumer shutdown. What do you say about that name? Senator Schumer, can you hear me?
I can't hear.
Senator Schumer, can you hear me? I don't think Senator Schumer can hear me right now. Maybe the government shut down.
Yeah, right. He could hear everything. He just didn't want to answer the question. I bet you his chief of staff was going, just say your audio went out. Say your audio went out. You know, and he listened. That's what I think what happened there.
Fabulous. Now, meanwhile, Sarah Elfreth has come out and had another whinge and complain. Let's play this clip for you.
It's deeply offensive that the president is threatening to fire federal workers if we can't reach an agreement without offering any meaningful solutions here. The president continues to threaten those workers, but please know, if you're a civil servant in the state of Maryland, know that we have your back as a team. That's why we're here today, to announce all the ways that our offices can continue to deliver for you each and every day. The federal government might be shut down, but our offices are working. We will answer every phone call. We will respond to.
Well, so
what are they going to do? Are they going to take state taxpayer money and take it out of the rainy day fund to help pay for these, you know, federal employees that are hanging out in their bathtub and drinking champagne while this is going on?
Well, maybe they could just, get right down to tin tax and just write to George Soros and say, George, can you extend?
Cut us a check.
Seeing as you own the government anyway, why not? But it's interesting that what it does is it exposes that the Democrats, whilst pretending that it's all about, people's jobs and livelihoods, they only really care about themselves. But that is the deep state in action, because if they lose government employees, they lose that stronghold over the power structures that exist there and this hidden deep state. I'm going to play you now John Kennedy because he's always incredibly valuable for his insights, but he goes a long way. And then as this is sort of evolving today, Pam Bondi's comments a little bit later on justice, and of course this points again to these Soros-appointed DAs in this crime infestation that you seem to have in the US. Let's play John Kennedy. We'll come back.
Sir, good to have you back on. Where are we at tonight?
Well, we just took our last vote of the day. There will be a shutdown. Everything happens for a reason, but sometimes the reason is you're stupid and you made a bad decision. And my Democratic colleagues have made a very, very bad decision here. I knew they were going to do this 2 weeks ago when they listed their demands. They're demanding, for example, that we not check people on Medicaid for eligibility by income. Just let anybody sign up who wants to sign up. They're demanding that we give free health care to foreign nationals who are in our country illegally. They're demanding that taxpayers pay for sex change operations. If you list all of their demands and add them up, it's between 1.2 and 1.5 trillion dollars. Now, they know it's an unserious proposal. They know we're not going to accept it. That tells me that this decision to shut down government is not based on policy, Rob. It's based on politics. And here's the politics. The loon wing, the socialist wing of the Democratic Party, does not like Senator Schumer. And he wants them to like him. He wants them to love him. They have asked that government be shut down, and Senator Schumer has agreed. But once you shut down government, you've got to figure out how to get it back open. A wise person once said, if you pray for rain, you got to be prepared to deal with the mud. And I don't know how they're going to deal with the mud, because we will never, ever agree to this list of demands. So I guess we'll just stay shut down in perpetuity.
That's your side, and that's the Republican side. That makes sense to me. I've seen their list of demands. This is how they're telling the story on their side. I want to play that and get your reaction to it.
The president has sadly made his position clear. He would rather shut down the government than work with congressional Democrats.
It just seems that we're going around in circles, but at the same time, you can always get a little bit of wisdom out of John Kennedy. How do you put it all together, or are we going over the same old ground here?
Yeah, I think we need more mustaches and sombreros, to be quite honest, on a lot more of these Democrats. Look, I think the bottom line is that what they want to do is they are looking for an opportunity to unwind parts of President Trump's signature achievement, which is the big, beautiful bill. And a lot of the things that were in that bill that we were able to cut, they're trying to secretly now throw back in and say, we're going to have a temper tantrum and we're not going to do what you want to do, which is a clean resolution to keep the government open unless you do our demands. But what they don't understand is that they are going to lose major by having the government shut. The longer it's shut, the more Russ Vought is going to cut more and more and more government programs, which again, I hope it stays closed for an indefinitely long time. Because if we can get rid of 100,000 people and we can get rid of all these welfare programs and all these other programs that we're paying for, and trans this and trans that, and mice with testicles on their face and all the weird things that they want to pay money for, and all these experiments, I say keep it closed. Keep it closed as long as humanly possible.
You know, when you said that, all I could think of was that scene in Men in Black where he pulls back the mask and he's got the bald chinny. And how about that? So
exactly.
Awesome. So now let's bring Joy Reid into the show. Joy Reid warns Americans of mega plans. No income tax, no regulations. Earn as much as you want and leave it to your children with no taxes. That's the world they want. My God, is that a bad thing, Josh?
I think you remember I went to X and I immediately was like, wow, for the first time in my entire life, I absolutely 100% agree with Crazy Joy Reid. And it's interesting that they think that that's a bad thing. That's how out of touch they are with the American people. That is what she said is exactly what we voted for. All of those things, to leave our fortunes to our children without being taxed to death, to be able to live in freedom, be able to cut these taxes and cut the spending and lower the debt and all this. And she's thinking that that is somehow evil and somehow bad. It goes to show you that one side of the aisle is so pro big government and the other side of the aisle is not pro government and not big government. Although there are many on our side that like to go over to the dark side a lot too. Those are called the rhinos. And so that's always been the challenge for us. If we didn't have to fight people in our own party, think about how many more things we'd be able to accomplish.
Oh, well, absolutely. Well, as we conclude the shutdown component of the show, we'll give the last word to Charlie Kirk, who said back in 2018, members of Congress should not be paid during a government shutdown. And there it is. And you can see the division right there. And just following on Charlie Kirk, the usual procession of conspiracy theories and alternate ideas, etc. There were some that were suggesting that there was no autopsy, for example, but there was a video that popped up yesterday from a lady who was a mortician that said, I have it on good authority that there was an autopsy. But again, it's the lack of information that leads to this scenario here. Do you think it's affecting people on a daily basis, or is it just adding to a distrust in this scenario, or have we moved on from Charlie's assassination?
Well, I don't think we've moved on from it. I think it has affected millions of Americans deeply, myself included. I know many of the people that saw him as such a beacon of light and freedom and wore his faith on his sleeve. And he just was a tremendous human being. Mm. And, you have to understand with what he was able to accomplish, not only picking the majority of the cabinet that we have now, but more importantly, turning point action, going out into the swing states, making sure that the youth came out to vote and making sure that we put President Trump back in office. It's just a shame that he's not alive to live to be able to witness what's going to be happening in the golden age. That's really a travesty in and of itself. But look, I think if you look at everything from that perspective, and you see what he's been able to accomplish and who he was as a person, no, I don't think it's going away. But look, one thing I will say about these conspiracy theorists and things like that is that when these people come out and say these different things, what they do is they feed into the left's narrative, because the left wants to destroy Turning Point, right? They don't want 132,000 new chapters in high schools and colleges all around. They don't want all these famous people going around and speaking at these different events. That's why they did a bomb threat at Utah University just the other day. And so they want to stop that. So if we are then on our side also doing certain things and saying certain things that feed into the left's narrative, then the left is getting help from people that shouldn't be helping them. And I think people need to understand that. Are there some questions? Yeah, sure. There are some questions. But in reality, I think the majority of the evidence shows that this was indeed a one signal shot. I also have said numerous times, I don't believe this kid was working alone. Absolutely not. I think there's an entire underground online, organization of these trans terrorists that we need to go into. We need to pass something called TIVE, which is basically a new designation for the FBI for trans terrorism, basically. And it would allow the FBI to have more tools to go into these online chats and things like that, and cybersecurity measures, and be able to break down, get into, infiltrate, and shut down and destroy a lot of these groups and things like that. So hopefully the FBI is going to adopt what the Oversight Project has suggested to them, and we'll see what happens. But again, the conspiracy theories need to go away. There's another one where there was a trap door and he disappeared through the trap door. Well, if you do research on that college, there is an underground tunnel system that they have had on that campus for, however long that campus has been there. So there are answers to some of the weird things, but doesn't seem like it satisfies everyone.
And that's the thing, isn't it? People are so bruised, battered, and suffering from PTSD because of a distrust of government. That,
exactly, and I understand that. I understand why people would be looking for, alternative reasons for this or an alternative reason for that, or what about this guy in the crowd, and was this a hand signal? And I get it. I totally understand. But this is a new FBI. This is a new Department of Justice. We're just getting started, I believe, in the indictments and things like that. I've been saying for the longest time, we may have an indictment Christmas. And who knows, maybe it even happens sooner. And I'm sticking to that.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up, because we suffer a lot in Australia, particularly politically, because of, again, a distrust and an inability to get people elected, even in the minor parties. And so what happens is it gets more divided, more fringy, more idealistic, and less 51-49, the idea of politics. And so it becomes complicated. Now, because you can't come together and build on anything, whereas the left with the Greens, etc., here in Australia, they focus on their climate change idea. It's this, again, total idealism, and yet for lefties, idealism works, because if you can get everyone behind you on climate change, well, you're going to create this great big juggernaut. And on the other side, the opposite holds, and individualism, freedom of thought, etc., works against the idea of a collective. Having said that, we have been suffering in Australia for some time with this idea of an under-16 social media ban, Josh, where they were going to prevent kids from getting on and using social media. I'm going to play you a very important clip now. It runs for about a minute of a development. The government is backing down now on the under-16s for our Australian viewers. Take a look at this. This is really important information.
Huge changes to the under-16s social media rules. It's just been announced, and they're really unexpected. First of all, they're not checking everyone's age now. They're just going to do random spot checks, because they said checking everyone's age seems unreasonable when the platforms already have so much data about our age. Plus, under-16s can now use social media as long as it's someone else's account and a shared device. So if mum's Instagram is open on the family iPad, they can use it. This feels like a big backflip, doesn't it? And here's why it's occurred. Because there's been so much pushback by parents and experts, including myself, that the restrictions in their current form just didn't work. There were too many ways to work around it, like hello VPNs. Plus, similar kinds of restrictions have recently been brought into the UK and other parts of the world, and they just aren't working very well. So under 16s still won't be able to open a brand new social media account as of December the 10th, but they can still use it. I think this change in direction also shows how difficult it is to introduce these blanket kinds of restrictions on social media or technology, which is in this constant state of innovation, and we as users are also in a constant state of innovation in our uses of these devices.
I think that's a breath of fresh air. It's some sort of back down, but it also shows you the power of people power, even if at an individual level, the pushback from the population and the government realising that there was a genuine overreach there. But you have to juxtapose that, Josh, with this Keir Starmer announcement of compulsory digital ID in his country, that you can't work without it by the end of his term, specifically because to prevent illegals from working in that country. Well, if you're handing out welfare, how many illegal people are going to have to work anyway? That doesn't make any sense. But again, this breach of trust by a government to make everyone guilty before innocent. And I present it to you because in the US, you are the lucky ones, really, that you're not having to deal with any of this. But it just shows you that in these alliances with these Five Eyes countries, Australia, the UK included, we're not even on the same page anymore.
No, sadly, you're not. And my audience will know immediately. And I don't have to do I told you so, but many years ago, I talked about this, and I talked about the digital ID many years ago, 4 or 5 years ago even. And I said at the time, what they will do is they'll come out and they'll say, no, it's not mandatory. No, it's not mandatory. We would never mandate that. However, if you want to drive your car, if you need to get money out of the bank, if you want to go to the supermarket, well, you're probably going to need to be chipped, or whatever the digital ID may be. And so that is how tyranny is sold as convenience, number one. But more importantly, that is how the globalists work. They know that they can't just come in jackboots and say, that's it, you have to get this ID, because the people will react, in a violent way, like, whoa, what do you mean? No, I'm not going to do that. So what do? They ease it in, right? They give you a big smile on your face as they're jabbing it right between your ribs and pulling it out. And it's the approach of big government and globalism and how they do things that people need to not only recognize, but really fight back against, because the bottom line is digital ID is absolutely tyrannical in every sense. And what they will do eventually is they will basically tell you, no, it's not mandatory, but you can't participate in society without it. So no, you're right. It's not mandatory. We won't force you to do it, but we'll just take everything away from you to make you basically submit to the digital ID. That is the thinking of the globalists. That is how the left operates. And people in Australia and England and everywhere else in the UK and around the world need to understand that. Perfect example, Alberta, Canada, just announced that they're doing a, quote, gun buyback program. Gee, what country did that? Let me think for a second. Oh, yes, that's right. Australia, after that horrific shooting in Tasmania many years ago. And so what they're going to do now is they're going to say, for the next 2 years, we're going to give you money for your guns, and you can hand in your guns and be law-abiding citizens. But after the 2 years, well, then we'll just let law enforcement deal with the rest of it. Now, he wasn't specific on it, but you can read through the tea leaves there. They're going to try to confiscate guns in Canada. That's how these leftists work. So in America, we have a robust First Amendment and, of course, Second Amendment. I meant to say Second Amendment. And because of that, there's 425 million guns in the hands of 125 million gun owners, of which 42% of households have more than 2 guns. So in our country, we're in good shape. And again, it's not for hunting. It's not for, going out and foraging for food. It's for protection, for one's self-defense, and more importantly, and in, dire circumstances, protection from an overreaching, overbearing government.
Well, your timing's perfect because now I'm going to play for you an historical clip from former UK PM Margaret Thatcher about government. Let's take a look at this.
You have to fight to keep freedom. Because there are always people who say, oh, give a little bit more power to government, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more. Then one day, you've got so many people employed by government that they have a vested interest in keeping more and more power in the hands of government and less in the hands of people. No, it shall not be. The governments are there to serve the liberties of the people, not to restrict them.
She was absolutely incredible. The relationship that she had with President Reagan, of course, and then I guess you could add Pope John Paul. So really the three of them were so in synergy on world economics and world geopolitical affairs and things like that. And the world was a better place. I mean, we saw the end of communism as far as, the wall going down in Berlin, and so many things that happened during that time to advance peace and prosperity. And she was a big part of that.
Growing up, I was a lefty, and I wasn't a fan of Thatcher, but mainly because of programming, I would say, from anything else. But when I take the 40,000-foot view, and I do so with the theme of space today, Josh, I look back and go, if you could sum it up, it would mean the expensive price of freedom. Meaning that Thatcher was famous for the poll tax back in the day, and there were different things there, but it was a restructuring. There was the coal mining issues, etc., in the UK. But what she was trying to do, like all conservatives try and do, is to limit government. John Kennedy talked about it earlier, rather than expanding government and for the preservation, as she said right there, of your liberties. That is what they are meant to serve. So it always comes down to an ability to be able to be self-sufficient versus an inability to be self-sufficient and therefore government dependency. But if you have a system that is intent on making you less intelligent, less skilled, more dependent, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So one side of politics wants more power, more government, etc., and that just leads to the pathway towards communism. And the other one is saying less, and the in the pursuit of happiness, self-sufficiency, raising your family, etc., etc. So there is an ultimate divide. So it's very hard, even though it's globalism versus nationalism, which is really the new cover for left versus right, but in a new format. And again, the collectivity of one Earth, one planet, one world government controlling everything under the communist system, so that all freedoms are out at that stage. But it is ultimately unsustainable. You can't have a system of government control. It's been proven throughout history. Mao, the 5-year plans in China, etc., they just simply don't work. Productivity reduces, reduced quality of life. And at the end of the day, what are we doing it for? If that is where you're at and you're going to reduce the population because it's unsustainable, are we just going to eliminate ourselves from Earth and wait for the next intelligent species to arrive in 1 million years' time?
I don't know. But, one thing I will say about the whole COVID and the lockdowns, what it did is it probably startled the globalists, number one, because they didn't think that there was going to be millions upon millions of people in countries all around the world that were going to be marching in the streets saying, no, you're not going to lock us down. We're going to do what we're going to do. Now, there were some countries, sadly, that used the iron fist of government to control their people and lock them down and keep them from going outside and all this and that. But I think what we need is, and the United States would obviously have to lead, but we need a resurgence of nationalism coming from the United States of America, which it clearly is at this time, right? And that needs to spread into every other country around the world. There needs to be a network of conservatives, because you're absolutely correct. It's not about Republican and Democrat. It's not about labor versus, whatever the other parties are. It's really about nationalism versus globalism. And that key structure is viable in every country around the world, because in every single country around the world, there are people that are to the government subjects that are being ruled by a smaller minority, right? Their government, the Albanese government, where you are right now in Australia, the Starmer government in the UK, Stolz's government in Germany. I mean, the list is endless of how many, Macron, all these different people are ruling over a large amount of people that don't want to be ruled against. So I think there needs to be a synergy between the United States and all these countries of patriots. And we need people in these countries to be brave and work with the United States and all the patriots around the world, because we're all brothers and sisters in freedom and liberty and prosperity. We are all fighting against globalism. And it doesn't matter whether we're in the United States of America or if we're on the other side of the world in Australia. We're all fighting for the same thing, for a better future for our children and our grandchildren, and more freedom. And I think that message goes across the oceans and it goes across the continents.
You know, I was preparing for an interview with Igor Lopatinok, who is a filmmaker who worked with Oliver Stone. He's made Ukraine on Fire. He's got a new film about Iran called The Great Game. And in this particular preview that I was watching of one of the films, Oliver Stone's talking and he mentions the name George Soros. And then they cut to a scene of Soros saying the birth of a nation, Ukraine. The reason I bring that up is that obviously with what we're seeing with Russia expanding and now on a massive recruitment drive, 100,000 new soldiers or something that they're looking for, and they've expanded to the point that they're literally taking anyone. But when you go to what's happened now with Trump's peace plan with Israel in Gaza and wanting to lead that new peace body, for example, you don't hear of a George Soros talking about the birth of that nation at all. But I find it also ironic that the globalists are pushing for the birth of the Palestinian nation, which at its core is a failure. It doesn't meet any of the criteria to build a nation, almost as if they want to build a failed state in advance, almost to prove that you can't do this anymore. I feel like I might be developing my own conspiracy here, but I'm just not sure of why it is that the globalists are pushing for a new nation at this time in history, one that is automatically doomed for failure.
Well, probably because they need more people to control. That would be number one. But number two, look, I guess the best person that said it was Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich years ago said that Palestine, or the Palestinians, are an invented people. If you look throughout history, there's never been a state, there's never been a, quote, Palestinian people. That area has been ruled by different sects, by different, different regimes, all these different people and things like that, different kings and rulers and everything else. There's never been the actual, quote, state or the people of Palestine. I am not a huge fan of this peace agreement. And the reason is because it looks like there's just too much minutia. I don't see a lot of fangs in it. I don't see a lot of things that are going to hold these people accountable. And quite frankly, I've said this before, and I'll say it again until I'm blue in the face. You don't negotiate with terrorists. You can't negotiate with terrorists. Look at history. I mean, Anwar Sadat tried to, right? What happened to him? They killed him, right? What happened in 2004 or 2005, actually? Ariel Sharon, former prime minister of Israel. What did he do? He ripped up 25 different settlements, 21 in the Gaza area, and he displaced these Jewish settlements. Then he did it in Samaria, and he did it in the West Bank. So about 25, 26 of these settlements. What happened after that? How did the, quote, Palestine people respond to that? They elected Hamas, okay? They elected Hamas less than a year later, and Hamas has run Palestine in that area ever since. And I think there's a distinction people need to understand. Hamas is Palestine, and Palestine is Hamas. They are one and the same. If you look at the polling after October 7th, it talks about somewhere around 65% of the people understood and said that what happened on October 7th was not a genocide against Jewish people. And they still support the Hamas party in that area. So again, what happened to Ariel Sharon after he tried to make peace? Well, he ended up having a massive stroke, and he lived in a vegetative state for 8 years until he passed away in 2014. So why am I bringing that up? Because you don't negotiate with terrorists. you get rid of terrorists. I think at this point, he ought to let the IDF, Mossad, and Israel finish the job.
It feels like that's the only pathway that can actually occur, because all peace plans, including the one, because Australia supported the Trump-Gaza peace plan, involves Hamas being removed from power permanently. But the only way that they're going to surrender, because the moment that they surrender themselves, they're dead anyway. They're going to be taken out and punished. So they literally have to evaporate, get new IDs and disappear if they think that they're going to live. But ironically, they promote martyrdom, so they're meant to die for the cause, but in this case that they don't want to. It doesn't quite make sense. So there's so many things that don't work out. So it feels like that the only way through is to let Netanyahu again go in and keep going and going and going, which the world doesn't want to tolerate anymore. And so we feel like that we're...
Including President Trump, sadly. He ought to just step out of the way and let Netanyahu do his job.
And so the only other alternative is that Hamas literally, falls on their swords and walks out, and that's the end of it, which you just can't see happening. It's a complicated story once again. Now, Josh, I want to play for you a little bit of a happy story. There's a mum who has a non-verbal autistic child, and she tried her son out on the vitamin therapy. And take a look at this.
So my son just started Leucovorin for the first time. In case you haven't been paying attention, that was the other drug that was mentioned when they were talking about this Tylenol fiasco, which, put a pin in that. We really should be talking about Leucovorin. My son is 5 years old and he's nonverbal, low-functioning autistic. He wasn't always this way, though. Up until about 1.5 years, 2 years old, my son knew words, a lot of words. He couldn't say sentences, but he could say 1 or 2 words put together. And then there was an incident that I'm not allowed to speak of because of TikTok regulations. They took down the video that I tried to talk about what had happened in there, but you put the two together. Right after that, he just had a steep decline in language, and it halted, and he hadn't spoken since. He's been on this medication for less than 48 hours, and my son just spoke for the first time. My nonverbal son just spoke for the first time in over 3 years. Every day I've been praying for an answer, praying for my son to be healed. And all this time, we've just had Leucovorin sitting on the shelves. I'm telling you right now, if your child is nonverbal, if you are the parent of a nonverbal autistic child, get them on Leucovorin as soon as you possibly can, because this is the answer that we have all been praying for.
That God bless that young mother and that child. That almost brings tears to my eyes to know that we trusted the real science. I've said this before, and I even said it on your show. They haven't done these studies. Del Bigtree said they haven't done these studies in 24 years. All these experts have not done it because of this, because of the pain reliever industry and everything else. They didn't want to find this information out. So I'm just so happy and thankful that RFK Jr. and his staff and all the folks at HHS are putting people over profits instead of the other way around. And here's a miracle. Here's something that this drug is now helping this child. I mean, it just warms my heart. God bless them.
And look, there will be people out there that will insist that it's not going to work for them, or alternatively, they're going to insist that they're not going to use it because it's a Trump-led idea, and that just shows the mental health problem that is out there. But at the same time, for those parents, and I met a lady the other day who was a non-verbal teenage boy, and she would do anything to change it. So there it is. It's actually working in real time. We've got a couple of quick stories before we go, Josh, also in the health department world. This is from Australia. COVID vaccines in the Daily Mail now reading might raise the risk of cancer. Contentious study claims as it links jabs to 6 forms of disease, including breast and prostate. Well, took them to the 29th of September 2025 to work that out from a mainstream perspective. So at least that's coming out. But this one is another big shock. And of course, it goes to totalitarianism. Check out this headline. In China, in Inner Mongolia, police order all adult men in Chinese city to submit blood samples And even in China, it's sparking fear over state surveillance and the possibility of state-sanctioned organ transplants. Can you believe that?
That, yes, I can, because China leads the entire world in organ transplants. They have teams of doctors that come into China. And basically, I've heard that there are gangs that are paid by these doctors to find Americans or foreigners or whatever that are not Chinese, basically, and kidnap them, find out where they're staying in their hotel rooms, go up, find them, and literally drug them, and then put them in a bathtub with ice, cut out their organs, and leave them right there. And they wake up in a bathtub of ice with their organs missing. I've seen the videos; they're horrific. And China has been doing that and basically stealing, kidnapping organs, if you will, for decades. It's a really sick and insidious practice. And I say it all the time. China is the greatest existential threat to America and all of humanity. It's not even close. They just test fired 3 triple nuclear bombs just a couple of weeks ago. They wanted to see what 3 nuclear bombs could do all at once. This is a totalitarian regime, a maniacal regime. They want world domination. President Trump needs to understand that Xi is not his friend. Xi is his enemy, and he needs to treat him as such. We need to decouple. America needs to decouple. And quite frankly, Australia and all these other countries, you need to be fighting against the Chinese influence in your countries. I wrote a whole book on it. I have a whole chapter in my book, Preserving Liberty, called The China Syndrome. And I go through all the different things that they have done and are capable of, including, by the way, TikTok. They don't have the algorithms targeting children in China. No, just in other countries, and especially America, Australia, and Europe and things like that. So China is an extremely dangerous country, and it's because of the CCP.
No, absolutely. Well, covering also, and so it is, look, it's frightening, isn't it, when you see stories like that? And some will say, well, China's leading the world in terms of technological development. Shenzhen is like a 22nd century city, very different world. But at the same time, I was watching a video last night, and these young kids were excited because their face was their ticket when they went to a theme park in China. And I'm thinking, well, if you want to think that that's a convenience, and at the same time then be identified by your blood sample, that if every single person has a registered blood sample in China, well, you're certainly asking for it. But we live in a world where you can't ask the right questions. But at the same time, if you can, we've shown you today, even in Australia, an almost totalitarian state, with people power, you can certainly make a difference as it came to the under-16 laws. Just quickly, in brief, Keir Starmer is now the least popular PM on record. A poll finds only 13% of voters are satisfied with the Prime Minister, the fewest of any leader since the 1970s. And also we've learnt that good old Albo has ruled out an independence referendum, in other words, to become a republic, despite the fact that he is a Republican himself. And Josh, you might be looking at that and thinking, hang on a second, how can this lefty communist-style Prime Minister want to be a republic or a Republican? And one wonders, therefore, how these things get blurred. And I just want to make the point that here in Australia, our Republican movement was born out of the idea of not wanting to be under the monarchy, obviously, but it's run by our left, who are globalists, and King Charles himself is a globalist. So I've asked the conservative monarchists in Australia, why would you want to be part of something that it's a globalist regime, if you will? And they say, well, we just haven't come up with a better system, which is the whole reason why my other show, The 51st State, was born, because I wanted to ask the question, why don't we set up a Republican Party in Australia that wants to move away from their globalist king?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, independent movements we've seen throughout history. Some of them have been successful, of course. And I would absolutely encourage Australians to start a new party, start an independence for Australia party, and challenge the government. I think that that's a wonderful thing to do. I mean, it happened in Spain, right? Catalonia and things like that. There's been other countries that have had independence movements. And look, if your government wants to control you, then you have to figure out a way to control your government. And the only way you can do that is with enough people. And the masses of people can take out governments and can overrule governments, and it can do things that an individual cannot do. And your strength is in your numbers. And so it's a movement. It's dangerous, but freedom is never a safe thing to continue to have. And so you have to fight for it, just like Ronald Reagan said, right? It's not passed down through the bloodstream, and it's not given from generation to generation. You have to fight for it. Otherwise, as he said, we'll be talking to our grandchildren and telling them stories about how we once were free. We don't want that for Australia. We don't want that for Europe. We don't want that for Ireland. We don't want that for Germany. We don't want that for the United States of America. We don't want that for anywhere. We want freedom and liberty, and people have to fight for it. And, strengthen numbers.
When you put it all together, and it's such a brilliant concept, I'm thrilled that we're able to work together with a cross-pollinated news program, given that we're aligned but we're not. And in my head, I'm imagining an X, and at one end you've got liberty, and at the other end you've got control on one of the two lines, and on the other one you've got scarcity and abundance. And it seems that that is the economics of the world based on scarcity, and you either achieve that through control or you achieve that through free enterprise and the ability that therefore it's a meritocracy, if you will. But if you just were able to switch from scarcity to abundance, you don't need that anymore. And that is the point yet again. But when you have the control of climate change, doing things like reducing energy, deindustrializing, moving backwards, you can now see that you're never going to get to abundance. And on the contrary, you are going to get more scarcity, and therefore you're going to demand control. So in other words, the people who believe in freedom must also believe in abundance, and that is the great difference there. And I wonder if that's going to be an intellectual stepping stone for people to now realise a much bigger picture, but we only arrive at it the way that we have through the examination of news stories, both in Australia, the UK, around the world, China and the US, as we've done today. And I feel like that we've contributed to make a brand new concept in news that I'm absolutely delighted that we've been able to put together. Josh, it's been a ripper. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Absolutely. Anytime, any topic. And I was going to say, in my book, in the introduction, not even in the first chapter, but in the introduction, I talk about the famous economist Alexander Tytler and the 8 stages of a democracy. And I would encourage folks to read that and know about it, because it does go through 8 different stages. And ask yourselves in your countries, what stage are you at in right now? So folks can go to Amazon and pick up a copy of Preserving Liberty, or you can go to my Substack. I absolutely have the best deal on Substack, bar none, for only $49 for the year. That is 18% less than even the $5 a month monthly, and it equates to only $4.08 per month. The only thing missing from that offer is the gun, the ski mask, and the getaway car. So check it out at jbushow.substack.com.
Fabulous. So there are the 2 places to go, jbushow.substack.com and channel51.com.au, where you'll get access to all that information at the same time. Thanks, everyone. It's been brilliant yet again with Josh. See you all on the next show.